Hello and welcome to an as yet unnamed podcast about SaaS B2B software. I'm Dale Walden from Njord & Co, where I specialise in product positioning, pricing and go-to-market. And today I'm joined by Steve and James. Please introduce yourselves. Steve.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Steve. I am a early stage sales consultant. So I've spent the better part of my career, almost 15 years now, going on the 0 to 1 journey, usually been the first employee. Now I like to work with founders who don't necessarily, have maybe the need for someone to bring on full time, but want to learn from somebody who's maybe a few steps ahead of them.
Awesome. James?
Yeah, I'm a PPC guy. I specialize in Google Ads, LinkedIn ads for B2B SaaSes who are funded usually between Series A and C. I love to be involved when the B2B SaaS is ready to kind of take its existing channel strategies and, apply what they know about their positioning and accelerate their growth. So that's where I come in.
Awesome. So the astute watchers or listeners or viewers will have figured out we've got 3 different perspectives, one from product and marketing, one from sales and one from performance marketing. 3 different perspectives on how to scale your B2B SaaS business. And damn it, we're going to tell you, you lucky listeners, what we think are the best approaches, techniques, and dare I say, strategies that make B2B software businesses grow and scale properly. But first off, Steve, I think we've got a listener question.
Jeff is asking for, should I focus my SaaS business on scaling or being profitable? Assuming you can't do both.
Well, the answer here is, should I scale or be profitable? And the answer is yes. Unfortunately, in this market, you now need to be able to do both. But this is possible. I think a lot of the culture around digital, technology startups is that scale at all costs. And this is a bit of a hangover from those early 2000s where startups were in a bit more of a blue sea market, as people call it. So digital businesses were at scale, backed by big venture capital, and do this big land grab. And sorry for mixing the metaphors. Think about Google, Facebook, and these are the exceptions that prove the rule. They're not examples to be followed. They kind of had competitors, and yes, there was Yahoo, and yes, there was MySpace, but these were sort of monsters way off on the horizon or the other end of the ocean. Or the market was swinging was growing 10x every year. So kind of who cares about profitability right now? Let's just focus on scale. But now the market is much more mature, particularly in the B2B world. VC money and investment, for the most part, is reflecting that. Basically, profit or growth for B2B SaaS, for the most part, the brutal truth is you need to be able to do both. So to do this, you need to stay focused. And the first thing I tell people to focus on is about your customer. And I mean, identify who your customer is. So the type of business you're going to be focusing on. We talk about ICP or ideal customer profile. Steve and James, I'm sure they're going to pick up more on this as we continue the chat. And I think the main thing to think about when you're thinking about your ICP is, are you selling to big enterprises, or are you selling to smaller startups or SMB companies? So are you thinking about companies that are maybe 10 to 100 people, or are you thinking about companies that are hundreds or even thousands or tens of thousands of people? And so if you think about nothing less, think about the size of the business, and this will dictate almost everything else in your decision-making process. Right. I strongly advise people to have a bias one way or the other. So either I'm going for SMBs or I'm going for enterprises. Either sell a product for 1 to 10 people, or it's going to be only for 1,000+ people businesses. So taking the SMB size first of all, let's look at that. So for SMBs, you need to have small deal sizes. The cost can be flexible. So let's say they get more users or getting more value out of the product, you can start to increase what you're paying, what they're charging, what they're paying you. But ideally keep this below $10,000. There's a lot of research that shows that business models need to change if your deal size goes over that magic $10,000 deal size, because you'll no longer want to make those purchases with a credit card. They want to go through a sales process. So the great thing about SMBs is you have short sales cycles and more importantly, low touch. So typically you're giving people a free trial, and within a month or so, they're deciding whether they're going to continue on the free trial or they're going to upgrade into the paid or premium version of your product. And typically you're also selling to the user. This is a really important distinction. the person that's using that free trial is going to be the person using the tool. So if they're in the driving seat, they've got the credit card ready to pay, and they can judge whether the product's good enough. They don't need to go and check with a whole bunch of other people to figure out whether they want to buy the product or not. And so with this area, in terms of the product, your UX really needs to be on point. Like we said, you can't have lots of human touch. The UX needs to be intuitive. It needs to be obvious how to get value with either a very quick demo or even no demo. You see lots of products where you download it and immediately it's obvious. They take you on a step-by-step journey through the product, and you're getting value really, really quickly. And so to do this, you'll probably need to experiment with free trials or freemium offerings. Some features free, but other features that you'll pay for as well. Switching gears to enterprise. For this, you need to have big deal sizes, but they should be fixed, ideally for a long time. So you want to be looking at 2 or 3 year contract lengths, if not longer, if you possibly can. And by big, I would be aiming for over $100,000 of deal size. We mentioned less than 10K for SMBs. I strongly advise people against pitching for that middle ground of 10 to 100. It's okay when you're starting out. You just want to get those first few logos onto your website, get some proof that people are using your product, getting value from it, and you build that trust with future clients. But you should be designing your product, you should be designing your pricing in such a way that it could be bought by a company who's going to pay for over $100,000 for it. Why is that important? Well, because with big enterprises, those sales cycles, which I think Steve's going to talk about even more, are going to take 6, 12, maybe even 18 months or longer to close. And so you've got to have that big payoff simply to pay the commission to your sales team and keep them motivated and engaged in that sales process, because there's a lot of work involved in that process. And the other good side is, though, however, you can afford a lot of human high touch. So as well as the sales, but also onboarding with customer support, those sort of things. And you need to bake that into that high price point in order to afford that and be profitable. And in this case, the UX maybe isn't quite as important. Yes, it can't be terrible, but the important thing is that you're going to have a human support, CS to tell people on hand, maybe technical teams to help with integration on top of that. You can afford, unlike the SMB market where it's all self-serve, the UX to be not quite as crisp. And then we're going to go-to-market. So at this point, we've described the go-to-market strategy. For enterprise, I said you're going to need some kick-ass salespeople. I already know we've got Steve. So Steve, what happens next?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about like being in the enterprise, there's seeking to the enterprise and like what makes maybe a kick-ass salesperson or a sales org. At this stage, it's really less about selling to a person, and you aren't actually now just a quarterback, if you will, but American football analogy here. So you are not the person who's necessarily doing anything other than running a play and getting the ball to where it needs to go. When you're selling, let's say, let's take like cybersecurity. That's probably one of the better, more nuanced enterprise type of deals where everything is 5-6 figures, and you're talking mission critical components, right? Your responsibility is to keep companies' data secure or their uptime or manage compliance. There's all this massive, very weighty, very important outcomes. And they're going to involve the entire company's business organizations, right? So it might be their products, it might be their marketing services, it might be their customer data. So you need likely to be speaking to dozens of people throughout this process. You're saying these can be 18-month deals. So when you're trying to sell something that's $250,000, $1 million plus, right, a year, these are things that must very first have a budget secured to them. So if you're coming into a company that wants or needs the solution, but doesn't have the budget until, say, 6 months from now, because of when you start talking to them, these are things you just have to be aware of. It's so much different than a typical, say, $10,000 or even a $50,000 deal where you're selling to the marketing team, right? Or you're selling to the sales team. You're selling something to the product team. So I think those are two things to think about. Like enterprise is typically an entire organizational change that's required, whereas when you're selling to a single business unit, both are still complex. And at the core, what you're doing in these, what you're doing as a seller is you're trying to attach yourself to a critical C-level objective, right? So you want to know what is something, especially if you're selling to a public company. You mentioned big logos like Google, etc. If you're going after a public company, this is a great time to look at things like what do they talk about in their earnings reports, right? Every quarter, they have to tell the world what they did, what they're planning on. And this is often where they'll tell you the things that are important to them as a business. That's a great place to start. If you have something that can attach to something that a C-level person is telling the world is important to them, that's what you're going to craft a whole case around. And then your job is to find out at every step of the way, who else is going to be using that, who is going to need to be interacting or signing off on some sort of decision. And you need to be less of the person who is making a decision or helping one person make a decision. You're actually trying to find sometimes 3, 4, 5 people, and you're just coaching them within the company so that they can go get the decision made for them. You find somebody on team A who you have identified a really big, important problem for them to solve, but it needs collaboration or cooperation from another group. And all you're doing is giving them the information they need to sell internally the budget allocation for them. And then often the superpower that's lost in all this is just a lot of keeping your eye on the ball. Are you checking in every 7 to 10 days type of thing, right? Like don't let any amount of time lapse that's too long. Always be adding value when you can step in, right? Don't send the dreaded hey, I'm following up, this works. This is important everywhere, but especially the enterprise, it's managing 20 different people, all of their individual needs, their schedules, their processes, and making sure that you're always moving the ball down the field at every step of the way.
Let's pull that thread in. So you talked about adding value. So rather than just saying, hey, have you done it yet? Kind of the classic follow-up email. Give an example or two of like what that might look like in practical terms. What might you actually put in the message?
Great example. So one of the things that's pivotal when you get into really complex enterprise selling is you have to have some sort of internal framework that's usually called like a sales qualification framework. One of the most famous that's got all sorts of permutations, something called MEDDIC. So if you look it up at MEDDIC. I'm already forgetting. Sound it out and Google it. But the core thing that matters is with this framework, right? What it helps you do is it kind of gives you an X-ray machine throughout your process, right? The N, for example, is always like metrics. So what are the metrics that the stakeholders you're working with care about? What are they measure on? What are they trying to improve? If you don't know that, then you don't know what you're selling to, or you don't know once they're maybe doing like a proof of concept, or even once they become a customer to make sure they don't churn, you need to know what it is you're trying to improve. And then there's other things that are more nuanced, like paper process. Oftentimes this is, deals, what they do is they die. And when they die in like the 11th hour. And oftentimes it's because of something that could have been identified earlier, like the legal team needs to be involved. In what stages of the deal does legal need to come in and sign off on things? Do they have their own contracts and procurement paper that needs to be signed? And so that's where deals start to stall for months and months at a time. So try to figure that out early. And when things are, when you find there's maybe 2 or 3 emails or phone calls where nothing's going on, ask, how can you help? What's blocking that? What was something you talked about needing to get done that hasn't, right? So just always try to think of yourself as a problem solver for their problems and do whatever you can to sort of move those barriers.
And so you talked about deals dying at the 11th hour. What are some of those procurement pitfalls? What are new companies? It's obvious once you know it, but maybe isn't obvious for early stage teams.
Yeah, great question. One thing you want to know as early as possible. Let's say you're working with a VP of marketing who's brand new to the company, right? Maybe you even sold them your same product at a previous company, so you already have this trust and relationship. and you're trying to help them figure out how can they go internally and get your product put in place because they loved it so much previous. Well, they're gung ho. They brought you to a meeting. They've got other C-levels in there. Everyone's aligned. But what the new marketer doesn't know is that procurement will only sell to companies that are on the approved vendors lists. Well, how do you get on the approved vendors list? That's something that you need to find out, right? Because they're not going to change how they buy for you just because they really like your product. But you can figure out what it takes to get on that list. Now, that might take 3-6 months, right, of back and forth. And maybe you don't have a certain type of compliance, like a SOC 2, or you don't have some recent audit or something that, right? All things that you can do, and knowing them as soon as you can helps you at least forecast accurately so that you don't think you're 3 months away from signing a deal when you're actually no less than, say, 10 and 12.
Awesome. So that avoids those 11th hour failures where you think you've done all your homework and then suddenly you get a gotcha that, months ago you should have asked, like, say, like, oh, are you SOC 2? Have you got a SOC 2 certificate? All that sort of stuff.
It'll at least mitigate them.
Yeah, you're not going to avoid all of them, but and then talk about that sort of stakeholder management. What does that look like in practical terms? What do you need to do to get that really humming?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, and this is where it's much more art than science when it comes to selling, is the very best enterprise salespeople. They impress the C-level person they're speaking to, or the EVP, whoever most senior person, right? Oftentimes it's called like the economic buyer, right? Or the decision maker. They may not be the person who's actually going to even use it, but they are ultimately the one who will see the big picture value that you're creating and will have a lot of authority on whether or not that decision is made. You need to know their business as well or better than them. Now, this is harder to do when you're not working with, say, public companies. So the flip side of that is if you are selling this type of software or something that's a 6-figure, 7-figure type of package, you likely are selling to someone where you can get this information. So this is where having extremely good business acumen, knowing where to look for the things that are important to the buyer, understanding not only their business, but their industry, using their language. Like, again, how do they speak about themselves on their website? How do they, what are they forecasting for positively and negatively in their earnings reports? So that when you come to the table from the very first call, you're showing them that you not only understand the product you're selling and the space that you operate in, but you know their business, their fears, their excitements, their competitors, their customers, as well as you possibly can, so that you can be seen as a trusted advisor. That's what you're really trying to get to, is this sort of trusted advisor, this value-added type of consultant, if you will.
Great. And then at the start of that process, we're addressing these problems all in the wrong order, but like, it doesn't matter. I think that's okay. So you often see companies when they're going for enterprise sales, they've got a very specific problem they're trying to solve. Great. They employ a strategy called account-based marketing, or ABM. Just demystify that for us.
Yeah, so we'll just that like cybersecurity example. Let's say you're when you come into the company, if you're a seller, you'll get assigned something like territory. So we're maybe talking a bit more of an advanced company in this case, but I'll just finish that analogy and talk to maybe a newer business. It's all designed for you. You get to sell to financial services in the Northeast, right? So where your world will exist of, say, 100 accounts, because those companies are the only 100 banks in the 10 states that you're allowed to bring business into the company. Bring that forward, you're a newer business, right? Maybe you're just starting off and you've got a very technical product that can be sold to the enterprise, or you have success with smaller businesses and now you're trying to go up market with a more advanced product that can be sold to the enterprise. Well, now is when you want to go back to what you were saying at the beginning, Dale, like, what is your ICP? We talked about maybe the size of the business, but now you want to go into things like, who are the titles of the people we're selling to? And can we think of anything like a persona for them? Are they a CFO who is a career financial services operator, right? That type of person is going to value certain things and not value certain things a lot differently than, say, a chief revenue officer who's been working in Silicon Valley in their career and is on their fifth business. So when you really need to understand, who can I sell to, or who do I think I can make a very compelling case to? And then you go and you look at the world and say, who are the accounts, right? What are the type of companies where those people exist? So those are the two ways to do account based, where you either have accounts because you can only sell to a certain group for whatever mandate, or you think of what is the type of person that I could sell this to very compellingly, and what are the companies that person works for, and maybe pick like a dream 100 and focus on those intent.
Got it. So I think we can safely assume it's going to involve quite a lot of trawling on LinkedIn, maybe quite a lot of event tendencies, and getting some emails out potentially. But if we want to fast forward to these, maybe what are some of the tips or tools to kind of, because I think we see lots of SaaS tools themselves that are designed to help people automate some of these processes. Do you have any recommendations there or use cases and those been effective?
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, there's a lot of things out there. It's probably a curse of optionality more than anything. But I think broadly speaking, what you will need, no matter who you're selling to, what stage, account base or not, and at bare minimum, I think everybody will benefit from, say, like a LinkedIn Sales Navigator, like, right? So for those of you who don't know, LinkedIn has a free service, which is mostly just sort of a profile and some other searching functions. One of their like marquee paid products is this extensive filtering system and a much broader access to the page views and the types of people that you can see. And because this is all self-reported data that people tend to keep up to date, it's generally the best place to start when you're trying to look at the world and all the business operators in it and filter them down from things like geography, title, or advanced things like do they log into LinkedIn every 90 days? That would dictate whether you maybe want to send a connection request and try to engage with them on LinkedIn, or if they're not on that platform, you're probably going to need to find some tool to get work email addresses, maybe even phone numbers, right? Something like that, where there are really only a few channels that you can reach out to people, and you never really know who on the other end prefers which channel. So you're going to have to try them all out. But I would say, if nothing else, start with LinkedIn. You can figure out ways to message them directly through like InMail, which is an in-network email that also is sensitive email. You can connect and then start to do direct messages. So you're chatting with them. If you can't get something going there, you probably need to rethink your pitch and your persona more than you need to find another tool, is usually what I say.
That's great. Cool. So switching gears then, if we maybe switch to SMBs, that smaller end, so trying to get those products that are less than 10K out. James, what do you think?
Well, first of all, Steve, that was all well said. Intimidating to follow that suit, but yeah, I mean, with SMBs, it's in PPC, and I'm looking at a really small fraction of what a growth strategy could look like. And so I don't want to sit here and, I could be biased and say PPC is the end all be all solution for things, but I turn a lot of people away that I speak to because they're not really in a place to grow, and that even includes SMBs. We'll talk about. I'm going to just not talk about enterprise right now because that's a whole other beast in terms of using PPC for sales. But with SMBs, there's still these ranges of, does your product cost $5 for the user, or does it cost $500 for the user? And so I think that's kind of an important thing to focus on. But for the most part, I kind of like to look and assess in ranges. So again, approaching this from the PPC side, if PPC is viable, but I also hope the takeaway is that, when it's not viable, the things that I'm looking for to be in place before PPC. And I think that's kind of where you can tell. I can't really tell you what your SEO strategy, your content strategy, community building strategy, sales strategy could be. But in some cases, I like to see those things in place before I'm here. first of all, the first thing I look at is there bottom funnel search volume or acceptance for, or is there bottom funnel search volume for your product? So is there scheduling software for salons? Is that available? That's really where, for example, Google Ads, which is, in my opinion, where in search, where you're going to get the most value in PPC if you have those bottom funnel search results. To me, that's just like pure intent. You can select the bid you want for that. You know exactly what that person wants, and kind of a way that I prep my clients before working with me. Not that this is the actual desired result. It's like we want to be targeting keywords that, even if we never converted, or if we didn't know how much we were converting from it, that these keywords are 100% people that we want to be paying for and coming to our site. So that's just kind of like the confidence factor. That's an ideal situation. Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, go on. So just maybe just give an example of like, so maybe just explain the funnel first of all, what we mean by a funnel in this case for the uninitiated, and maybe give an example of what a top of funnel search term might be, and what a bottom of funnel search term might be, so we understand what we're talking about.
No, that's fair. So bottom funnel search volume, I consider that keywords with like most often, just to surmise it pretty simply, is like it includes software, tool, platform. In mid funnel term would kind of sit in the area. Let's stick with the salon scheduling software because that's the one I chose for some reason. Salon, scheduling salon staff would be your mid funnel term. That's kind of like a problem aware search. It's someone who you can address if you were to target that word. You know exactly what they're looking for, and then to move that into the bottom funnel, I'd say like salon scheduling software. High funnel, I mean, I would never target these keywords with PPC, but it's like disorganized salon, staff not showing up or something like that. Super high funnel, super we got seats filled and no staff to cut hair. So that's kind of where I'm at with the funnel in terms of how I look at it. And I look at the funnel in terms of keywords for the most part. Does that answer your question, Dale?
Yeah, so you want to avoid, why does my salon business suck? That's not top of the funnel, but I want to buy some software to fix my salon business now, or easy to install salon software, something like that might get you close to that download and conversion to a paid customer. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, the closer you can get to like targeting, I mean, beyond just having that software tool platform word in there, the closer you can get to targeting maybe an industry or a feature that your SaaS offers, the better you're going to do, especially in like, you don't want to, if you're a salon scheduling software, maybe scheduling software would be considered a bottom funnel term for you, but you kind of enter yourself into this massively dense competitive space of all the other scheduling softwares for all the other different industry cases. Even if you are a scheduling software and one of your best use cases is for salons, and I was just starting your ads, I would suggest starting in those industry or feature, maybe your like automatic AI scheduling for salons, if that's a feature that you have. I would start in these kind of more niche, less competitive spaces. And as you give Google more data, because ultimately the success in Google Ads now with automation kind of taking over how Google Ads are run, giving Google more data, then you can get into these more densely competitive spaces and you'll see better results faster. But that's just kind of one facet of what I look at. The next thing, and I think this kind of is an extension off of that, is, and Dale, this is obviously where you would come in, and this is why I like to talk to people who have been through, intense, they've figured out their sales, content, and product fit, especially because speaking to product fit, you need to know exactly who your ICP is, how they shop for the product. Especially as you get towards, even in SMBs, like say you're a Zoom Info and you're in, I don't know if you consider that selling to SMBs, but I guess I would. But their product can get up to $300 a month, I'm assuming, and that's going to take more buy-in from more people in your company. And so understanding how people at your target is important, because you might be starting to shift up funnel and target. Can't find anyone's email for outreach or something like that, and you want to get your foot in the door, especially when it's competitive. Those clicks are going to be cheaper to move up funnel. And yeah, so the next thing that I'm looking at is product fit. Like, are you creating a new product that no one searches for a problem that people do search for? Then that's not an impossible situation for PPC, but then it kind of shifts the expectations. You're saying, okay, well, you're not going to convert people right away. No one's searching for, AI procurement prediction platform. That's a client that I have. They take data, world data. They use AI to predict commodity prices going forward for a couple months in advance. And, no one's really searching for that product per se. But what we did there was we shifted up funnel. We said AI, or no, we didn't say AI. We said like copper market forecasts. That's someone who is our ICP. They're looking that up for the most part because they're trying to figure out where the market's going. They're not aware of the tool that they offer, but we can address that specific intent by giving them, we shifted our offer to be, here's this printout of, the next 2 months as predicted by our platform. And then, that creates the relationship, with that client first, and then you have an inbound salesperson engage with them. Again, that example is shifting a little more towards enterprise. And, I would only suggest running a strategy like that if there is a successful inbound sales team already in place. That's not something you kick in and then say like, and I've heard of people doing this before. It's like, the founder will just handle these. And then, the founder's expecting, we got these MQLs in. They weren't necessarily looking for our products, but, maybe we'll be able to convert because they're MQLs. And, what ends up happening is they reach out to them 5 times and they're like, these leads are no good. And then, PPC is shot out the door. So you really need those processes in place before that. So then the other thing is like, if they're a scale up, we're looking at product market fit. If they're a scale up, do they have a lot of money to spend to kind of learn and chunk out the kinks in their process? Are they looking to accelerate? I think there's a misnomer with Google Ads that it's kind of like you turn it on and it works. So even if you're a scale up, I still think there's a lot of other better ways to use your money from the get-go than to necessarily use PPC. With the scale up, there's the assumption that there's a market fit already and there's money going into it. So that's, a good case for PPC, but yeah, so I don't know. I guess money is the main consideration that I'm looking at there. It's like, are you using your only marketing budget and it's $2,000 a month for PPC? I don't think that's a great place to be because it still takes time to learn with PPC. It's still going to take time to churn, figure out what actually works. Then one of the last things I look at is, what end, or I guess I already talked about CLV, huh? So the things that I like to see in place.
So maybe just explain, maybe just break out CLV, like try to be a non-foolish acronym environment.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So with CLV, looking at which end of that, I guess, spectrum within the small and medium-sized business realm you are, customer lifetime value. We're looking at, are you on the small end? And I think Steve, you spoke to this before, but if you're selling a software that, the rate for it is $5 a month versus selling a software that the rate for it is $1,000 a month, that lower end software is going to be purchased by one person. That decision is going to be made within the week. It doesn't really matter what the situation, in my opinion, is. If you're selling that software for $5 a month, that person is going to be much easier to convince to buy it than the $1,000. $1,000 you're going to have buy-in, wired in, you're going to be then appealing to multiple people, and there's going to be touch points. And so the marketing spread that is involved for, talking about that $5 versus the $1,000 anecdotal examples is going to be very different. It's so much easier to start. For example, they did data for Walmart sellers basically, and they did predictive data and then reactive data that helped people change their listing in order to show higher on the search results. They were very easy to sell because their software was $15 a month. And, some of those sellers are just 1 to 5 person businesses that are in the first place, selling on Walmart. So that's a lot easier because even if there's not bottom funnel traffic for that, you can actually shift up funnel to mid funnel. So maybe it's like you're looking for Walmart data or seller data, rather than like Walmart seller data tool, which would be like an ideal bottom funnel term. But because the product is so much cheaper to the user, it's going to take a lot less of a decision cycle. Targeting that mid funnel term comes into play in terms of a like wanting to see ROI right away from PPC. You shift up to like $1,000 a month to the other side of that anecdotal spectrum. You start talking about like I work with an AP procurement software, like AP accounts payable software. Then you're talking about, as you said, Steve, it's still in the SMB range. They're still trying to attract the smaller businesses, but you're still talking about appealing to a procurement professional and a revenue, officer and that kind of thing. And when that comes into play, then you have to acknowledge that, yes, that bottom funnel traffic is there, but there's a lot of competition. You have high CPCs, so that's just kind of the first part of the equation. And yeah, you'll convert people from that bottom funnel traffic, like AP software. Maybe you're doing AP software for construction companies. That gets you a little more into a niche. But you have to accept that you're probably going to need to start with a slightly bigger budget or lengthier expectation in terms of realized revenue, because you're talking about then putting some top of mind campaigns on LinkedIn and in display ads, and you're looking at creating engagement audiences that focus on behaviors like returning to the site a few times with multiple page views and then bidding on those. So yeah, that's what I'm looking to do on either end of the CLV spectrum to answer your question in the longest way possible. That suffice.
No, that's great. And so can we maybe give an example where we sort of do bring these two worlds together, James, where we've got an enterprise sales process? Can you describe scenarios where putting performance marketing, whether that's PPC or LinkedIn ads or maybe some other channels, when do those two things work well together?
Well, it depends who you ask. I'd say a lot of enterprise salespeople say they don't work together. But I think with the advent of, and Steve, interrupt me if you have any other perspectives on this, but with the advent of these like lead feeder softwares and warm lead softwares where you can see accounts that come into your page and how they interact with it and they integrate with your HubSpot. And lead feeder, just to be clear, I guess, is a ABM focused software that shows the companies that come into your website, their activities on it and how they got there kind of thing, rather than just an analytics shows them as, a pixel or user 1287305 or something like that. So yeah, that the lead feeder is kind of focused more on the quality. And so for me, where I've seen success, and back to that AI procurement prediction software that I was talking about earlier, where I've seen success is that there's strong integration with me and the sales team. The sales team is really, really locked in on the positioning of the products and the ICPs. And, I'm kind of taking orders in that stance. I might be generating mid-funnel leads, maybe even high-funnel leads, but for a large part of that budget, it's going towards staying top of mind. So the goals shift from being necessarily conversion focused, which is still like a goal in the account, but a lot of it is touch point focused. So, we see in successful accounts, their first touch point isn't with us in PPC, I should say. It's not a click on an ad, but rather it's, sales sends a cold out email. They view the page a couple of times. That enters them into an audience that, then we can retarget in LinkedIn and Google ads. In more sophisticated, higher volume cases, we can actually target broad keywords at those people. So if they're searching something within our realm, we're popping up to the top. So yeah, it becomes more of a piece. And then at that point, like if I'm meeting someone who's like, is PPC going to work for me? My answer is more like, I would need to talk to sales. Your expectations have to be shifted from this like lead generation machine to this piece in a much bigger puzzle. Steve, do you have anything to add about that?
I think that's spot on, especially what you're saying, where it's not in different types of sales, right? The PPC gets involved in different aspects of sort of the buyer's journey or their brand awareness. And oftentimes it is just awareness, right? Like that's what we want. And that could come from a cold email that drove them to, okay, who are these people? Let me check out the site. Maybe they click on a specific marketing page that you want to put into an audience that sends them a very specific ad. Like you could be a lot more. It's what I say English and that's really valuable is like ads, the PPC, any sort of performance targeting is a very data-driven game, and you need to have the data, as much data as you can have coming into it, the better. But know that it's going to be an iterative process. So if you don't have anything to start with, then can I start with PPC? Probably not. But know that if you do want to do that, it'll just take that much longer for you to get the data to refine your concept.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. It's very rare, other than, like I said earlier, in the case of a scale up, that you can just start and grow from just PPC. It's rare that PPC is going to ever be your most efficient channel. It's more of a way to accentuate, something you have that's working already. So in a lot of cases, it's having a good outbound and inbound sales program. And then on the other hand, if you're a smaller like SMB, it's about having a good content and, community oriented strategy. So you're getting that feedback basically before you have to pay for it. Because a lot of people are like, oh, well, test messaging by doing different ad copy with PPC. I'm just like, that's just going to waste your money in the end. That's not a good way to go about that learning process.
So we're kind of time, guys. It feels like we're in horrible agreement, which makes for terrible online content. Normally you want people screaming at each other and, screaming curse words. But if you disagree, if you're watching this and you disagree with Steve James and me, get in those comments, do the tear down, tell us why we're full of BS, and that we should be horribly ignored and pilloried online. We'd love that if you did that.
I would love that.
Bring it, guys. Great conversation, guys. And look forward to next time.